let's talk about another series in the East. Let's talk about the Sixers and the Heat. And right now, the Heat are up 2-0 in the series. The Sixers, their chances are slipping fast. I mean, James Harden is James Harden of NBA playoffs that he's always been.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and then of course Joel Embiid being out, that was a big blow for them. So Cody, I mean, really curious of what your thoughts are on this series. Moving forward, I guess.
I think the Sixers, unfortunately, are going to get swept. I think they'd even get swept even if Embiid comes back. In my opinion, is because the Heat's defense is too tenacious for the Sixers. The Sixers, they have Tobias Harris, they've got Maxey, they do have Harden. Even if they did have Embiid, I don't think that that's enough to really throw off the Heat's game. They're just playing on another defensive level that's kind of borderline like Detroit Pistons of like 2004 when they won the title that year, because it's very, very tough to score on this defense. But James Harden, you can tell with years of being in the league, injuries, he's just not the same. And now you add the playoffs, which he never performed well in playoffs very often. It's even worse. I don't think he's attempted more than 20 shots in this entire playoffs in general. Tyrese Maxey is looking like the best offensive player that they have currently outside of Tobias Harris, who's been the leading scorer the last couple of games. But, even still, James Harden is the guy that is supposed to be the elite player to be carrying them, and he's not doing that. And I don't know if it's maybe Doc Rivers' offensive scheme not getting him the ball. I'm sure it's based on rotation and ball movement, but I think that if they have a chance, they need to find creative ways to get Harden the ball and to get him open shots. But, does that even fit Harden's game, or is he just an ISO guy and then pulls up from three, which the Heat have already taken that away from him? So in my opinion, the Sixers are going to get swept. I don't think there's anything they can do. I mean, if Embiid comes back, maybe they can get one game, but then how well will Embiid play, just because not only does he have the thumb injury, now he's got the the eye fracture basically and a concussion. So when he comes back, how ready is he going to be? So there's just a lot of health factors that go against Embiid. James Harden isn't playing well. I think Sixers are getting swept, unfortunately.
I will push back in this sense of you had said that you felt like even if Embiid were in this series, you feel like the Heat were still going to win. I would push back a little bit. I think the way that Joel Embiid was playing this year, who was going to stop him? I mean, Bam Adebayo is a nice player, and he's a really good defender, and I think he can hold his own. But he's not going to stop Joel Embiid. You can't. They have no one that they can switch on Embiid that could kind of make life not as easy for him. And I feel like he could dominate inside. He could dominate. You added that element, that shooter element that you have in Embiid, and then you look at, Harden. As much as we're dumping on Harden right now, he actually has been shooting the ball well. He's just not. He can't create space like he used to. He can't drive to the rack anymore. So a lot of the times he does settle for shots, and a lot of the times he's just kind of passing to someone else. So for me, I do feel like Embiid was a big factor, and I did think that the Sixers had a really good chance of beating the Heat, but with no Embiid, and even like you said, if Embiid does come back, I still don't know if I could see them pulling out a game now, because like if Joel Embiid is only half the guy that he is, it's not going to help. They need all of Joel Embiid, and this kind of just reminds me of why they got rid of Ben Simmons, was because when Embiid went down, Simmons didn't take over the game. And it's kind of funny because they literally traded for a guy who they're like, oh, this guy can shoot. But now you just traded Ben Simmons, a guy who doesn't shoot but can get into the rack, could go to the rack at any time he wants to. And you traded for a guy who now can't go to the rack anymore and just can shoot it.
Yeah.
So they literally just swapped, and I think they lost a little bit of the defense, obviously, getting James Harden. So, I know a lot of people are looking at the Sixers, they won this trade, but I don't know. I still don't see how big of a benefit James Harden was for this team. I just don't see it. He's now basically a spot up or catch and shoot guy now. And he's not a bad person to do that, and he's a really good passer, but that's not what the Sixers needed. They needed more, and unfortunately it's not working out for them. So I think you're right. I think the Heat are going to sweep them, but I will say this. I do feel like if Embiid were there and he was healthy, I do think that this would be a really interesting series, and I would probably edge the Sixers just because my thought process would be, I don't know who's going to stop Embiid. But we'll never know.
Yeah.
So.
My only pushback on you, basically, if Embiid were here, the series would look a lot different. And it sounds like you would say that you would edge the Sixers more likely to beat the Heat with Embiid, just because how do you stop him? I would say that the Heat would take away all the other weapons and if Embiid's going to score, I think they all recognize we're not stopping Embiid offensively, but what we can do is we can take away James Harden. We can take away Tobias Harris. We can take away Maxey. And good luck with Embiid trying to beat us other ways, because then what's Embiid going to do? He's not going to pass the ball. He's going to turn the ball over more because he's trying to do all the offense on his own, and he's going to break down. I think that would be the strategy for the Heat if Embiid was in the season, which is why I would say, even if Embiid were in the season, I think the Heat, would allow Embiid to do his thing, but they wouldn't allow anybody else to. And without your supporting cast, you're not beating the Heat as collectively as they are. They have all sorts of weapons on the bench in their starting lineup defensively that make it very difficult to run the offense that you need them to do. Look at what they did to Trae Young. Look at, obviously, what we're talking about right now, what they're doing with James Harden. I think what they would do is they would just make everything around Embiid more difficult for him to be a factor in terms of facilitating. In that factor is what I'm talking about. But I get what you're saying about, they would put up a better fight. You're right in that sense.